as we know.
In spirit, maybe.
Welcome, everyone. Roy, I hope you're going to show yourself.
The video is on, and just I guess I've had some issues with the camera coming through.
Well, it's not yet. It's not coming through.
So, I know it's an issue of having.
Roy, very handsome picture of you.
There's no picture. I see nothing.
Oh,
Well,
thank
it
you.
flashed.
Oh, it flashed for a second.
Well, I didn't
Yeah.
even see it flash.
Yeah, I saw it for a second.
Yeah, I reloaded Zoom and it's still having problems. So I don't know.
I have that problem on my
I'll have to.
computer as well. And I have 3 things lined up so that if I can't get in one way, I can get in another way.
I have to jump off at 12:30. Don't want to be rude, just that you know.
Okay.
Here.
All right. That's okay.
I haven't tried Zoom on my phone.
Joni, are you going to show yourself? And you're muted as well.
I'm trying to. I just can't. It's not working.
Now I'm asking Joni Reisman.
Next week I will do
sorry.
it.
Yeah. Okay.
Vanity, you are a woman.
Hi, Sue Casa.
Hello.
All right.
Hello there.
Hi, Helen. You're not going to show yourself?
No, witches don't get on any pictures.
Okay, I'm going to get a haircut
How are
after this.
Wait a few more minutes to see. This is the rituals of birth, marriage, and death. And some of you have taken some of my other classes where I've talked about it, but it's always good to review. And some of you haven't, so.
There's another corollary this afternoon at 5:30 by
what's
another
that?
rabbi here in Las Vegas. It's called kosher sex.
Oh yeah, what is that? Shmuley
I-
Botiach. I don't know how he pronounces his name. He wrote that book.
No, this is like you, a woman rabbi with a similar history.
Oh, okay. What's your name?
Oh, interested. Her name is Rabbi Cookie Olshine.
Oh, I don't know her because I know another rabbi there.
I
but
didn't know her name.
I don't know her name.
What
Welcome,
temple is she at?
Julie and Ken, if you're there. Welcome, Nan, Lori, Sharon, Phyllis and Warren, Merle, everybody else I said hi to already.
I already saw you once today.
Yeah, oh yeah, for a moment.
Mhm.
Okay, sorry, I am not a computer with no audio or visual. Time for a new computer. For that, we'll wait another minute. Yeah, she says thumbs up to that. Okay. So last week, what did you talk about? What was last? I don't remember already. Well, whatever. Okay. What do you-
Rabbi Shapiro did the Reconstructionist,
Oh, right.
the modern
Right.
Jewish movements
It's interesting for people.
last week. Yeah.
That was
Yeah,
really
people are
interesting.
surprised that how old the Reform movement actually is, from the 1850s or something in Germany.
1848,
No,
First
there you go.
Congress.
That was close. Okay. What's the chat here? Oh yeah, that's from now. Okay, well, I guess we'll start. Welcome everyone. This is Judaism Basics and Beyond, and we're talking about birth and love and death, the three core parts of our existence. And we start with, of course, the ritual of the Bris, or as it's said in Hebrew, the Brit Milah. And the word Bris, actually the word Bris is Brit in Hebrew, it means covenant. And it's such an ancient, it's the first physical covenant, it's the circumcision, as we know. And we first read about it in the book of Genesis, when God tells Abraham to circumcise himself and all the men and his son Ishmael. This is before Isaac is born. And I think Abraham is something like 98 years old when he does it, and does it to himself, and he does it to his son Ishmael, who's 13. And you may know, I'm sure you know, that the Muslims believe that they are descended from Abraham through Ishmael. And I don't think it's anymore, but traditionally for a long time, they also practiced circumcision, but they did it at age 13, like Ishmael. But recently, I actually had a Muslim endodontist give me a root canal. And I said, can I ask you a question? Do you still do you circumcise your sons? He said, yes. I said, do you do it when they're 13? He said, no, we do it when they're babies. So they stopped doing that. Also, why, this is something I've pondered, why would the cutting of the male organ be a sign of a covenant? You know, what is so important about that? And apparently it was the way people also made oaths. And we actually see it, the word testimony comes from testes or testicles. It's the same place. And if you look at Abraham talks to his servant Eliezer, and he sends him off to find a wife for Isaac. And he says, put your hand on my thigh and swear that you will not get a Canaanite or an idol worshiping wife for my son. And, you know, the rabbis say it wasn't his thigh, it was his groin. Put your hand on my testicles and swear. So apparently this was a symbol, you know, men were, you know, running the show then. And this was, you know, swearing on your testicles was the most powerful kind of oath, solemn oath you could make. And I guess that's where they put the covenant. It's ancient. It wasn't, I was reading that in ancient peoples, for many ancient peoples, it was an observance, a rite of puberty or fertility or the attainment of manhood, but it wasn't only among the Jews, but ours is a covenant. It's not a symbol of our power, but it's a symbol of our relationship with God. And so we have this very elaborate, pretty elaborate ritual, the Bris, the Brit Milah, for a baby boy, which happens when he's 8 days old. Most of us know this. But, and if you convert as an adult and you're a male, you don't have to have any more a literal circumcision, but you have to spill a drop of blood. It's called tipat dam, a drop of blood. And so you have to prick the male organ and spill a little blood to symbolize this similar covenant. So that, and what is the ceremony and who performs the ceremony? Well, the name of the actual person who performs it, we say moel, but it's moel. It's a specially trained person. It could be a rabbi. It doesn't have to be a rabbi. And today, a lot of the moels or the mohel are urologists. And there actually is in LA one woman, mohelet, who is a urologist. I actually did a bris with her. And she does it. And she said she was doing them in the hospital because some people just forego the ritual and they do it in the hospital. And she was doing them and somebody said, why don't you become a moel? She was active in her shul. And so she got trained. And a lot of them today, because we know it's painful, we're going to talk about it in a minute, give the baby a little shot of Novocaine. So it's not the way it was for our brothers and fathers and grandfathers or whatever. So it's a quite elaborate ceremony, and there are different roles for different people. Also, most people don't know this, but you're supposed to light 2 candles at the very beginning of the ceremony. So you light 2 candles as symbols of life and the presence of God. So they're the 2 candles you light. So you ask the mother or whatever to take out her Shabbos candlesticks, and we light. Apparently there's this other theory that it was in ancient times to ward off the demons that might hurt the baby. And there are other rituals for newborn babies. We studied about the demoness or Adam's first wife, Lilith. According to the Midrash, Adam had a first wife before Eve, who was equal to him and refused to listen to him. And she was turned into a demon, and this is like a male story, and that she would be the one to harm newborn babies, that she would, crib death, and all those things were blamed on Lilith. And so the baby and the mother, when she was pregnant, they used to wear amulets against Lilith, this woman demon. And I have seen in the Skirball, if they still have their permanent collection, they show some of these medieval amulets with Lilith's name on that you wear against it. And some people to this day, I have a friend who's from a Sephardic tradition, that when a baby's born, they tie a red thread or a red ribbon around the crib post. Oh, you're nodding your head, Laura. You know about this?
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that.
And this is against Lilith. This is to protect the baby from demons.
Okay.
Anyway, and then there are two, the grandparents are important. The kvat, and their name it's Yiddish, kvater and kvaterin. The grandmother, and I've done it, when I've done this, I've had both grandmothers. People are all assembled. The grandmother brings the baby into the room, and the grandfather, and she gives it to the grandfather, and the grandfather, or it could be it could be the grandparents, or it could be godparents. Now in Judaism, people don't know this, but we also have we can have godparents. What is a godparent? Somebody who on some level, will be there if something happens to the parents, but also to kind of help enrich the spiritual life of the child in some way. So to bring Judaism in a more richer way into their lives. And the godparent, or it's usually the grandparents, stand and everybody says, welcome, Baruch haba, to the baby. Now there's also a special chair at every bris. It's called Elijah's chair, the prophet Elijah, because there's this idea that the prophet Elijah is present spiritually at the bris when you are being entered into the covenant with God. So it's just a chair, and they put the baby on the chair, and then they take the baby off, sort of to say maybe it was in the lap of Elijah or whatever. And then there's somebody called the sandak, which is usually a grandfather. It's the person who holds the baby during the bris, the sandak. And when I see it, in modern times, it's the baby's on a board or on some kind of a board, so he's steady and not loose. And the sandak holds the baby. And the moil says a blessing about the bris, and he does the cut. And in my, the ones I've been to when I was growing up, whatever, then they would take a little wine, a little cotton, or a piece of gauze, and dip it in wine and put it in the baby's mouth to kind of make the baby a little drunk or a little sleepy. And usually the baby cries and doesn't, but I've been to them where the baby screamed for the whole bris. It depends on the baby, the fear, the cold. Now I think with the shot, maybe they're crying from the shot, but they don't feel the cut, And then you say more blessings. And in modern bris, I have everybody call out a blessing. I also, usually at this time, we also name the baby. Right after the bris, we give the baby his Hebrew name. And we invite the parents to explain why they named their baby this name, who the baby is named for. Traditionally, Ashkenazi Jews do not name their children after living people, but Sephardic Jews do. They always name after the grandfather. And in fact, from my understanding, every single first son is named for the same grandfather. So they all have the same name in every family. The first son is named for him. And so they believe in perpetuating the name when the person is alive, in you can see right away that Judaism has all these superstitions that are a little crazy, like the demons. So why, if you ever wondered, or does anyone know why Ashkenazi Jews, that's Eastern European Jews, don't name their children after living people? Merle.
Isn't it something to do with the person might have had something bad in their history, and you don't want that child to have to live with the bad images?
Yeah, but what if then why would you name him after him when they died? I mean, why do you wait till someone's dead before you name, even if he's the most saintly person in the world? So,
Well,
yeah.
It's interesting because when our youngest granddaughter was born, my mother was within weeks of dying, and the kids really wanted to give her Hebrew name after my mother. The rabbi said, well, let's discuss it with your mother if she's okay with it. And I said, I think that would be quite an honor for Sasha to have mother's Hebrew name. But it was very difficult for Sharon and Jason to tell this story because of some of the family that were at the baby naming that would have thought this was awful to name her in any way after my mother, who was still alive, but certainly didn't know she was alive.
Right. So people think, why though? They don't know why.
Well, they think it's because somebody might say something. There might be something hidden in my case, in our case, in my mother's background that was awful, that they wouldn't have some kind of sin or whatever. That this is how it was explained to me. That you didn't want the child to live with that bad omen in their life.
But if she died, they could name her?
Apparently.
It makes no sense. So here's the reason, which also makes no sense. So when the angel of death comes down to take the person who's supposed to die and go to heaven, if there are two people with the same names, maybe the angel of death will take the wrong person.
Well, that's bad too.
It's great. It's so preposterous that the Malach HaMavis, that's what they call it, the angel of death, will come down, and there'll be, Sasha the old and Sasha the young, and they'll take the wrong Sasha or whatever. So it's not logical. It's superstitious. And I personally, my daughter's name is Lily, and my father was alive. He was not well, but his name was Leonard, and I named her for him. And because I said, I want you to know that there's somebody for you. And I said, and the Sephardim don't even believe it. They name anytime after living people, grandparents, grandfathers usually. So that's the reason. It's not rational, and you don't have to abide by it if you don't want to.
Well, they didn't.
Good, but there's no reason. I mean, it's whatever you want to do because it's not a rational reason. So anyway, they do the naming, and in the past, you would say like Joseph ben Moshe, Joseph son of Moshe. That would be how you would do it. But today, in liberal Judaism, we say Joseph ben of Moshe Visara. We say the father and the mother's name. Whenever I sign my name to a conversion certificate or a ketubah, I put my full name and daughter of, and my mother's name and my father's name. So that is, we're bringing women, into the importance. This is nothing new, I'm sure, but it's new compared to the thousands of years when you were just the child of your father. Now we have both. So what about women? Oh, by the way, of course, as in every Jewish ritual, we end the bris with food, and we have a big meal. We have a brunch. Usually it's in the morning. Usually do it in the morning on the 8th day, and then everybody eats and the baby sleeps. And usually the mother's standing in the back because she can't watch. comes and holds the baby and whatever, and the baby falls asleep, and everybody eats, and that's the celebration. So what about a daughter? So now in the
Rabbi?
Yes, go ahead.
Can I just add one point before
Please
you
do.
go on to the daughters?
Please do.
You constantly have mentioned the 8th day, and there's a science component to that. Just like in kashrut, we believe that it represents, health, at that time, which we aver at this time. But the reason for the 8th day has some validity in it because the neonate is not hemostatic and capable of stopping bleeding from a wound until about the 8th day. They don't produce enough clotting factors. Their liver doesn't produce enough vitamin K dependent proteins and hasn't received enough of them from the mother's colostrum and milk to make them hemostatic. So
Wow.
by trial and error and death and life,
I'm sure.
the 8th day, the time barrier.
That's fascinating.
for
I did not know
circumcision.
that. That is, she's like, it's good to have a doctor in the class. Probably they did it earlier in the baby who didn't stop bleeding. You're exactly right. It was trial and error. The rabbis say, I'm sure that's the real reason, but the rabbis also say the 8th day is when the world was complete. So, you know, the world was created in 6 days. God rested on the 7th. So the 8th day was the first day after the world was complete and rested that you could do it. So that was a midrash or a rabbinic explanation, but I'm sure this one, thank you, the medical one is probably how it all started.
There's
So
another reason for the extra pillows as well. Because as in my case, my father fainted away dead to the floor. Thank God there was a pillow there to catch him.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, yeah, you hold the baby on a pillow. So they now have what's called Brit Bat, which means covenant of the daughter. Brit or Bris is, you know, just for a boy, but Brit Bat is a covenant for a daughter. We don't cut anything, but it's usually, you know, a ritual where we welcome the baby and we bless the baby. We light the candles, we bless the baby, and we name the baby. Yes, Sue. You're, yeah.
Is that done on the 8th day too?
It doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be, because they'll, a lot of times on a Friday night, they'll come and name a baby girl.
Right.
Right.
Friday
No,
night.
you don't have to. Usually you do it within the first year. I mean, there's no time, but I think, you know, and some people have it in the home and some people have it in synagogue, but I don't, the baby naming is different than a brit bat. That's really like a same thing with food afterwards and guests, and we say blessings and we learn a lot of times the grandparents talk about the child and give it blessings. We try to make it as a beautiful ceremony for the daughter as we did for the son, just without the painful part. Painful part. So that's, you know, it's very similar, and there are multiple different rituals that you can find online or different rabbis create. There's no and they're doing the priestly blessing, which we do at all of our big, you know, ceremonies. So we do the priestly blessing and we name the baby and we talk about our hopes for the daughter are. And sometimes people do it in shul. And I saw something very beautiful when I was in Berlin, not this past summer, but the summer before. I went to synagogue services. It was in the Orienbergstrasse synagogue, which had been the biggest synagogue. It had seated 3,200 people. It was destroyed during the war. And now the facade is still there. They just fixed the facade. The back is just offices, but they have a little shul on the top floor. And a woman rabbi and a woman cantor conduct the services. And I saw a baby naming where they put the baby on the amud, you know, the stand where you would read the Torah, and they had a talit under the baby, and they had the parents and the grandparents, and each one gave a blessing and then wrapped the baby. And it was 4 wrappings. And the baby, and then they held the baby, the rabbi held the baby and named her. So that was very beautiful. So I might try that sometime. I said, oh, I'm going to try that. It's a beautiful ceremony.
Yeah.
So that's the birth, and we celebrate the birth. Oh, one more thing. If your son is a firstborn child, if your son is your first child and it's a boy, in ancient times, there was this idea like that you would give this child to the temple to work in the temple. And
Samuel.
they called, Samuel. They created a ritual called Pidyon Haben, which means
Right.
the redeeming of the son. So in order not to give your son away, you would give your son to a Kohen, and then you would give him 5 shekels or $5, and then you would redeem your son and take him back. And Orthodox Jews still do this Pidyon Haben, redeeming of the firstborn son. Okay, so what is Hannah? Hannah saying, I was born in New York City and was circumcised, and only Jews were brought into the belief that, oh, no, I'm going to go into that now, but that's interesting. Okay, so anyway, there's the Pidyon Haben, there's the redeeming of the firstborn son, so he doesn't have to go work in the temple. Now, we don't have a temple and whatever, but we still do the rituals. It's fascinating. And then other Orthodox Jews, and I can't really tell you where this comes from. I don't know. It's a custom, not a law, will not cut the hair of their sons until they're 3 years old.
3. Okay, right.
3 years old. I don't know why, but you see it. And then they have a ceremony called the Aufschieren, which means the hair cutting or the cutting off, and they cut his hair and they leave the payas if they're ultra Orthodox. So that's part of the whole thing. And then, of course, according to the Talmud, you start to study when you're 5 years old. The Talmud says at 5, you begin to study Torah. So there's a whole series of rituals for the child. The daughter, we have now the Brit Bat and the Bat Mitzvah, of course, which it's less than 100. I guess it's about 100 years old now. I think the first Bat Mitzvah was in 1925. And it was actually Mordecai Kaplan. If you were here last week, the man who started the Reconstructionist Judaism, he gave his daughter a Bat Mitzvah. So believe it or not, I teach adult Bat Mitzvah, B'nai Mitzvah, and there are women in my class and they're Browerman mothers. So they're in their 40s at the oldest, who were told when they were young that they were girls and they didn't need a Bat Mitzvah. So it's still happening. Yeah, but you're not in your 40s. You know, Sue, you're muted. You're muted, talk. Yeah.
You got that right.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, I actually did have a Bat Mitzvah. So that was pretty radical for my temple. And it was
Rabbi,
yeah.
have we ever gotten a full explanation as to why circumcision became the symbol for the covenant? Is this a bad joke by God? I mean, you wonder what type of thinking went into choosing that as the basis of the covenant, the circumcision. I mean,
as I said, I think it was considered the most solemn place to take an oath in ancient times. So that's what they did. You know, it was like irrevocable because it's cut into your skin. You can't back out of it in some way. And that's where people seem to make oaths in the ancient world. But I don't know. I mean, we don't have an explanation. Okay, now we're going to go to the Jewish wedding. Now, the thing about the Jewish wedding is one of the words for the Jewish wedding is called Kedoshin, and it comes from the word kadosh, which means holy. A wedding is a holy spiritual act. It's not a legal, contract, though there is a contract in it. It's considered a spiritual act to get married. And it also has quite a lot of different aspects to it, and it's quite beautiful. And interestingly, the huppah, which we'll talk about in a second, has become popular with non-Jews as well. A lot of non-Jewish people now have the huppah. The huppah meaning the canopy that is over the bride and groom. The canopy that is open on all 4 sides, just has like a covering to show that this is your personal space for the two of you, your private space as husband and wife, and yet it's open for love and support on all 4 sides from your family and your loved ones. So it's a symbol of both. It's your home, but your home with open windows and open doors, so to speak. Now, The two things you have to do for a wedding, the rest are, beautiful rituals, but in order to be legally married, you need two things. You need a ring and you need a contract, the ketubah. Those are the two main things. The rest are all just beautiful rituals that we have added over the centuries. One thing that most non-Orthodox Jews do not do is fast on the day of the wedding. According to the tradition, you fast on the way, which is considered a day of forgiveness, like you're starting clean, your soul is pure. So, and it's also a transition, you're like one kind of person, then you fast, and then you come out of it as something else. Yes, Jeff. You're muted.
One of the other things about the chuppah, that you may or may not use in your ceremonies is the 4 posts upon which this cloth or tent surface represent. And that's always been a very beautiful thought or element of that part of the ceremony when the rabbi describes what the chuppah is supported on, what qualities are supported by the 4 pillars of the chuppah.
And they are?
I wish I remembered.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see.
I'm asking, do you use that or?
I don't, you know what, but I'll find out because I think that's interesting. Okay, so you have the wedding, and before the actual ceremony, you sign the ketubah. The ketubah is the marriage contract, which used to be kind of the husband paying money for the bride and his promises to take care of her and his obligations. It used to be signed just by witnesses, male witnesses. But today in modern time, the bride and the groom sign the contract. They each have a witness or 2 witnesses. The rabbi signs the contract. And a lot of people have modern ketubot. They rewrite it to show their commitment, their spiritual, their emotional commitment, not their material commitment. Though this was a protection in a time when women had no rights, that the husband promises to support her, that he's responsible for her. So this was, and at the end of the wedding, the ketubah belongs to the wife. It's hers. It's her contract of protection. And you cannot get a divorce without her agreeing to give the ketubah back. So it was a protection for the wife, in the past. Today, we do a spiritual commitment ceremony. And I always tell people that on their anniversaries every year, they should reread their ketubah and all the things they promised to each other to remind them of where they were coming from when they got married. Yeah.
Is there a prenuptial component of separation in a ketubah as well?
There is now a new clause. I can't think of the name of it. It's like the Levine clause. There's some new clause now that is like a prenup clause that has been added in conservative and reform that you can sign. Though I've never had anyone sign it, but I know it exists. There is this clause. Also, I'm telling you the Orthodox ritual because I think you always should you should know all of it. The men are in one room where they're signing the ketubah, though now we do it together, but they're drinking and maybe studying Torah a little. And the bride is like a queen and she's sitting in another room on a throne, basically, or surrounded by her mother, her sister, her mother-in-law. And women come up and they kiss her and wish her well. And also the tradition is that one of the most effective blessings you can get is the blessing from a bride on her wedding day. So you can ask a bride to bless you on her wedding day, and her blessing is supposed to have special weight to get the kala, which is the Hebrew word for the bride, or the Yiddish, get the bracha from the kala. Say, will you bless me? And she'll, yes, Lori?
If any of you saw Unorthodox, they did a really good job with that, showing that particular ceremony. It was really well done.
Right. So you get the blessing from the bride. And then at a certain point, the groom is escorted into the room where the bride is, and the men are all singing and dancing and playing instruments, and they bring him into the presence of the bride. Why? To do what's called the bedekin, or the veiling of the bride. Now, bedekin really, I mean, they say it means veiling, but I also think it comes from livdok, which means to examine. And because in the Torah, there's the story of how Jacob was tricked by marrying the wrong sister because she had her veil on and he couldn't see her face till after the wedding. The father of Leah and Rachel, switched the sisters because Leah was the older sister, and Jacob ended up marrying not the one he loved, but the older sister. So from then, so we're talking 4,000 years ago, we always look at the bride's face first, and then we put on the veil. So the groom says, okay, yeah, this is it. It's not her sister. It's not her friend. This is the one I'm marrying. And then he helps her put the veil on. So that's the next.
Fool me once, not again.
What?
Fool me once.
Exactly. Okay. So now, we go to the actual ceremony. Everybody sits down, and sometimes people carry candles, like the parents of the bride and groom can carry candles. But first we have the groom coming down, first. Now because we're Americans or whatever, in Israel, they don't really have it unless they've copied us. Bridesmaids, flower girls, all that stuff. That's not necessary in a Jewish wedding. But it's nice, it's fine. But really, in a regular wedding, it would be just the parents, and it's not like just the father escorting the bride, or not just the parent. It's the parents escorting the groom up to the chuppah. And if you're Orthodox, my niece and my nephew, their nephew-in-law, they're Orthodox. Sometimes the groom wears a kittel, which is a white sort of robe over his clothes. Also angelic, she's wearing white, he's wearing white, and he's waiting for her. And then her parents together bring her to the groom. So it's not like the father giving away, because the mother is there too, and they escort them to the chuppah. Now we have the ceremony. And interestingly, like all Jewish ceremonies, it starts with a kiddush. Starts with a blessing, and traditionally you use white wine. So if you spill something, it doesn't stain the wedding dress. That is the reason for the white wine. You have white wine, and you do this, and then the rabbi does a blessing over the couple, and then it goes right into, in the Orthodox way, because sometimes, in the more liberal ways, you change it. It goes right into the ring ceremony right away, okay? The next part is the ring ceremony, where in Judaism, the ring has to be completely unadorned, round gold circle to show no breaks. It's just a perfectly round circle. And the groom puts it on the bride and says, in Hebrew, behold, you are behold, you are consecrated unto me according to the laws of Moses in Israel. And the bride does not have to do it to the groom, but in more modern times, we do it to the groom. And she can say the same thing, or she sometimes says, Ani ledodi v'dodi li, I am my beloved and my beloved is mine, and they exchange rings. If you want, you can have the bride and groom read their vows to each other. There are no vows, required, but, you can have them read promises before you do the ring ceremony. They can say, whatever they want to each other, and then you can do the ring ceremony, but that's not required. But most modern couples want that opportunity most of the time, unless they're too emotional and they say, I can't talk, I'm too emotional, I can't say anything. So sometimes they say that. And then you read the ketubah. You read the contract out loud to everyone, and in English. in Orthodox, they'll read it. It's in Aramaic. Nobody can understand it. But usually, you know, I have it read in English, and it's a nice opportunity to invite a sister, a brother, somebody to come and read the ketubah. And then we have the 7 blessings, and there are 7 beautiful bridal blessings that are read to the bride and groom. At my niece's, they had 7 rabbis, each read a different blessing.
Oh my God.
Sometimes just the rabbi reads the blessing. I usually invite the couple to invite different people from the family to each read a blessing. So you get to have 7 participants, siblings, parents can read the blessing, and you have them read the blessing. Then the rabbi usually makes a little spiel, a little talk. Oh, such a beautiful couple. I mean, I actually went to one wedding where I thought it was horrible because the rabbi just did a Torah teaching, which I thought was, who cares? But usually you talk about the couple, how great, how they met, or Jewish tradition, or there's beautiful midrash that your beshert is found before 40 days before you're born, your beshert is ordained, and all kinds of lovely stories. And then we end with the smashing of the glass, which we all know about. And there are multiple explanations for smashing of the glass. Does anybody want to share what they've heard or what they know to be the reason for smashing of the glass at the end? Does anybody want to say?
Was it something to do with the destruction of the temple?
Yes, to remember. Actually, there's a story in the Talmud that I learned in rabbinical school, which was interesting. And this is where it came from. A bunch of rabbis are at a wedding, and they had gotten, these are like in Talmud times, and they were getting drunk and raucous. And their senior rabbi, one of the big rabbis, looked at them and threw a glass down and smashed it and said, how can you be so happy when the temple was destroyed? You know what I mean? You have to have decorum. In other words, we can't be completely happy because the temple was destroyed. Now, that was in 70 CE. I mean, you know, but we can, yes, Sue? You're muted.
There we go. Yesterday, Rabbi Eshel gave a talk on Kabbalah, and he talked about the shards being broken,
Right.
and that Kabbalah, you try and put them back together. And it just kind of flashed on me. I wonder if that's related to the breaking of the glass, and that you have to, you know, and then you have to try, you're going to meld your 2 lives together.
Well, there is some connection. I don't think it has to do with the Kabbalistic shards, though. I love that story. It's that your old life is over. Single people, now it's a new life. So, you know, we're starting over. So, you know, smash the old life. Some people say it's to remind us of the brokenness still in the world and our commitment to repair the world, even in this happiest time. There are, you know, as opposed to the temple being destroyed, there is suffering in the world. And we still have to acknowledge that. And we hope someday their suffering will be alleviated. I sometimes wonder if it has to do with this breaking of the woman's hymen. She's no longer. I'm serious. You know, there's all this fertility stuff that's always in there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But I mean, yeah. But you know, we smash the glass, and it's like even if it's just that it's onto a whole new kind of existence now, and I can't think of only myself. And then of course we sing and dance, and then there's another section where the bride and the groom. I mean, wait, what's it called again? Hold on. I mean, I can't. Oh, the yichud, where they go alone. The bride and groom off for like 20 minutes by themselves to break their fast. You know what I mean? Because if they've been fasting. Let's talk about the Orthodox, but even the other one, and to go be alone, and for a bride and groom in an Orthodox setting would be to have their first kiss, their first touch, their first hug. You know, anything, because they weren't touching before, and also to eat and break their fast and just go, oh my God, we're married. Oh my God, you know, before everybody surrounds them. There's this thoughtfulness, I think, to say, let's give them a few minutes by themselves. And then, you know, they come in and everybody's singing and dancing. And the bride and groom are considered like a king and queen. That's why they're put in chairs and lifted up like thrones. And people perform for them and sing and do, all kinds of acrobatics and all kinds of things. And then in the Orthodox world, they go on and celebrate for 7 days. They do the Sheva Brachos every day, a different blessing and in someone else's house. And there's dinners and celebrations for 7 days. So it's really a big deal and a beautiful thing. And the Torah reveres or honors or respects the marriage so much that it says in the Torah that a soldier may not be conscripted in the first year of his marriage.
Right.
He has to be able to stay home and make his wife happy and be with his wife. You cannot take him into the army for the first year, during the first year of his marriage, which is amazing when you think about it. That
So to planting a vineyard and other trees during that same first year. So that equates the first year of marriage to natural events, let's say, that
exactly, having a
require
child,
the union.
but also just, that they respect the marriage so much that they say, they give you all these opportunities to consolidate your relationship and build your home and maybe start to have children or whatever. Because actually, when you think about it, if God forbid he is taken into the army and he dies, at least maybe there's a child that he left behind for the wife or something like that. So it's a very thoughtful, powerful wedding ceremony. So that's the Jewish ceremony. So
Earlier in this, Rabbi, just
Yeah.
one other question.
Sure.
Earlier in the ceremony, supposedly, I think it's the wife who is supposed to circle her husband 7 times.
Oh, I forgot about that. That's right. So exactly, when the bride comes, the circling, when the bride first comes with her parents, the tradition is to walk around him 7 times, and you're saying blessings, you're encircling him to create your home. It's like bringing angels into your home and whatever. But in modern times, sometimes the bride circles says 3 and the groom circles 3. And then the 7th one, they hold hands and they circle together. So the idea of the circling, I just want to, hold on 1 second for that. I just want to, because I have this whole thing about it. I want to just look what it says about it, because I might be leaving out a mystical, the usual custom is, why 7? There are 7 days in a week, 7 aliyot and Shabbat. And when a man takes a wife, appears in the Bible, that quote 7 times. And on Simchat Torah, the Torahs are carried around the synagogue 7 times. And we know that, 7 is kind of one of our mystical numbers, 47 and 7. So that's one of the reasons for that. 7 days of creation. Okay, so now we go to the Jewish funeral. And I taught an entire hour on this with one of my Wednesday sessions. But the thing that most people don't know is that when someone is dying, in Judaism, there's a confession.
Mm-hmm.
There's an opportunity for confession. It's called vidui, which is the same word we use on Yom Kippur, the vidui, the confession. And you try to have the person, in the rabbi's manual, it talks about the person saying that if I die, I ask forgiveness from anyone that I've offended, and I'm sorry or whatever. But you say the Shema. That is the big thing that you do before you die in Judaism. And we get that from when Rabbi Akiva was tortured by the Romans. Right before he died, he said the Shema, and then he said, now I know what it means to love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. And the Shema has become kind of the thing that from then on that we say when you know you're going to die, or if you're afraid you're going to die, you say the Shema. And then there are all these, again, superstitions, like you open the window so that the soul can depart, that you wash your hands, anyone who's been there because you were in contact with death, including if the doctors, nurses, or whatever, if you were in a Jewish hospital, they would say you should wash your hands. And also, if you're present at the time of death and you're a primary mourner, you do the kriya, or the ripping of your clothes at that moment. So this is idea in Judaism that we show our sense of grief by ripping a piece of our clothing. That I think is ancient in many places. You rip your clothes. We do it, at the funeral with a ribbon, where we rip that ribbon that we wear. But if you were Orthodox and you were in the presence of someone dying, let's say at home or whatever, you would rip your shirt or you would rip something right at that moment. Who's considered a mourner, a primary mourner? It's a parent, a sibling, a child, or a spouse of the person who died. The parent, but today, close friends, in-laws, nieces, nephews often consider themselves primary mourners or mourners. There's no law against other people being mourners, but they're not obliged. But these are the ones who are obliged to say Kaddish and mourn and have the funeral. Now, according to the tradition, the body of the person who died is not supposed to be alone until the burial. And so you take, I want to add one more thing. Another custom after the person dies is to place a candle near the head of the person and open the window, and you cover the mirrors. You cover your mirrors right away, because you're no longer concerned with, your visual, your external self. It's all about what's happening inside. So you take the body sometimes to a Jewish mortuary or whatever, and you have what's called the tahara, which is the cleansing of the body. And there are people in an organization called the Chevra Kadisha, which means the holy organization. People volunteer and train for this, who do this ritualistic cleansing of the body and wrapping the body in a shroud. According to tradition, all you wear is a shroud and maybe a talit if you want, but that's it. And you're going to be buried in a plain pine box. That's all that's required. And so the person is cleansed and laid out, and then there's someone called a shomer, or a guard, and people actually volunteer to sit with the person, with the body, until the actual funeral. Yes, Sue.
Do Reform Jews use the burial in a shroud?
If they want.
Some do?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to add, before we go back, that Nan Goodman said, this is true, that when the Orthodox have huge weddings, what is the responsibility of the parents giving the wedding to provide food and entertainment to the masses? Does each guest or family give a present when they are part of the community versus a close friend? I think, I know like 200 years ago, you had to invite the poor to your wedding. Like it was a tradition to invite the poor to your wedding. And there's a wonderful short story about a town in England, actually, where the poor went on strike and said, we're not coming because you don't give us the same food as everybody else. So they refused to come. And that was a big disgrace, because you had to show what a philanthropic person you were, and you had to have poor at the wedding. I think it just depends on, there's no rule about it. Some Orthodox, invite the whole community. They invite, I don't know, like the Chabad, or like in Brooklyn with the Rebbe, did they invite thousands of people to the wedding? I guess it depends what you could afford. And there's no obligation to give presents, none of that stuff. That's just whatever tradition. There's no obligation to do any of that. There is an obligation to help pay for a wedding if a bride and groom are so poor they can't afford it, to provide them with something. There is an obligation for that. But other than that, no. So going back to the funeral, You have the ritual cleansing called the tahara, comes from the word tahor, which means pure. So it's the purification of the body. And then the Shemira, where a person sits and guards the body. Some say it's an accompaniment, and we're ensuring that the soul does not have to feel alone during the time it is adjusting to not having a body. I mean, there's very clear belief that the soul exists, that the soul lifts out of the body, that the soul sometimes remains for a while, then goes to the next world, that there is a soul. And, you know, we've heard about these near-death experiences where people say that they've left their bodies and they're still there, and, you know, we don't know. But this happens until the funeral. Now, traditionally, the funeral takes place within 24 hours. That had a lot to do with decay and, you know, not being able to preserve the body. Today, in Judaism, people have funerals a week later. They do, you know, you can, you know, keep the body cool, so it's okay. And you do it when everybody can be there, because people live all over the country now. That tradition is not necessarily observed in more liberal homes. Okay, so once you come to the mourners come, they get that ribbon, and they do the Kriya ritual where you rip the ribbon and you say Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, blessed is the true judge, just saying that, you know, God took this person when the time was right. And people wear this ripped ribbon, or you could rip your clothes, but most people don't do it. It's a big honor and mitzvah to go to a funeral and accompany the casket to the burial place. And in ultra-Orthodox or Orthodox places, they read Psalms, and you stop 7 times as you're walking down to the gravesite, and you're reading Psalms the whole time for comfort and to honor the soul of the person. And then another very important part, we would think it isn't, but it is the eulogy. The eulogy is like essential to any Jewish funeral. And why? Because we want to tell the story of the person's life. We want to inspire other people with their good deeds. And we want to, you know, truly remember them in a respectful way. This is very important of the honor to give. And, you know, in Rosh Hashanah of our temple, the rabbi gives it. And then many times family and friends also speak about the person. And you learn so much about the person. You learn, sometimes you do things you didn't even know. And it's very comforting to the mourners to hear about their loved ones, because when you're talking about it and you're remembering they are still alive, it feels like they're still there. Memories help keep people alive. So that's very important. And then, you know, we also do the prayer El Malei Rachamim, which is like praying for the soul of the person to be in eternal rest, to go to the next world. And then we have the burial. And during the burial, it's a tradition that the spade or the shovel, everybody puts at least one shovelful of earth onto the casket, that it's put into the dirt backwards. In other words, the what do you call it? The part of the spade, this part, you know, that usually would be like this, it's facing backwards. You do one shovelful and you put it in backwards to show you're reluctant to bury this person, that it's hard and difficult. So you put it in backwards. And if you're, again, in an Orthodox ceremony, they bury the entire casket. They fill it up to the top. And ours, we usually just, everybody does 1 or 2, and we let the rest of the people working there do the rest. But if you're Orthodox, everybody would shovel it until it's completely full, which is a pretty traumatic thing, I think. And then the family, the guests line up in 2 rows, and the family walks through them like a guard on each side of a path, and they walk through the center when they're done. And you go and you begin the Shiva process. And when you go to sit Shiva, outside of the house of the Shiva house is water and a pitcher, and you wash your hands again because you were in touch with death and you need to wash. And you come into the house. Traditionally, as I said, the mirrors are covered. You do not wear leather shoes. You wear slippers or socks, or you're barefoot. And you sit on low seating. Like in my house, we took the cushions off the couch. So we were sitting low. You're sitting low. All of this is symbolism of mourning, sitting on the ground, sitting without shoes. I mean, you're like so bereft. But you also come in and you have a meal. People prepare a meal for you because you have to be, you live. Life goes on and we have to live. So the family eats, other people eat. Very important, though, that the mourners don't feel like hosts, that they are worrying about other people. They should not have to do anything except grieve. They call Shiva is 7 days, but really it's only 6 because Shabbat, we don't grieve. We don't sit Shiva on Shabbat. And if a holiday, Jewish holiday comes up, the Shiva stops. But the first 3 days are called the 3 days of crying. You don't have to, you can just sit and cry and sleep. You don't have to talk to anyone. You shouldn't be expected to be worrying about anybody else. You're just in your grief. Judaism really recognizing the trauma of loss and respects it. Every night, and also did someone have a question? Okay. Also at the gravesite, right before the burial, you say Kaddish. And every night during the Shiva, people come over and you have a Shiva minyan and you say Kaddish. You come over and you pay your respects, but you stay so that there can be a service and that the mourners can say Kaddish. This goes on for the 6 days, really, because Shabbat, you don't do it. Saturday night, you stop Friday night, you could resume Saturday night if you want. And then the tradition is on the 8th morning, you get up and you walk around the block. You go for a walk, you go outside. You've been in the house this whole time. You put on your clothes, you uncover the mirrors, you wash your face. Traditionally, you don't shave during that time. You're not really caring about your appearance. And you walk around the block. You take a breath and you walk. However, the mourning is not considered really over. I mean, if you ever listen to our services, they always talk about Shloshim, the first 30 days. The people died the first 30 days. The first 30 days are still considered mourning. They include the week of Shiva. So it's 3 more weeks where you have one toe in the world and one toe still in grief, meaning you may go to work, but you're not going to parties, you're not listening to music, you're not doing anything really joyful, you're going about your life. And I find, because I lost both my parents, emotionally, you can't listen to music. You're just totally not ready to turn on the radio and listen to music. You might listen to the news, but you're not going to parties, you're not celebrating, you're not in that place. And Judaism respects that those first 30 days, you're still in grief. And during those 30 days and for a total of 11 months, some say 12, it's back and forth, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And it's time to stop already. You say Kaddish for the person. You say Kaddish for 11 months or 12 months. And if you're Orthodox, you say Kaddish 3 times a day or twice a day if they combine the afternoon and evening service together. There's a tradition that every soul has to be, unless you're super, super righteous tzaddik, spends a year at least in Gehenna or hell, in some kind of a purifying place. And saying Kaddish for the soul helps it get out faster. Okay? So the more you say Kaddish, the quicker your soul ascends to the upper world if your soul had, some problems. They don't want to think that anybody would need the whole 12 months of Kaddish, so they do it for 11. They couldn't be that bad. So again, it's one of those things. But you say Kaddish usually for 11 months, and that is when traditionally you put up the gravestone. You put up the tombstone, usually after the 11th month, with the unveiling of the stone is usually at that time, where you have another little service at the cemetery. And as we know in Judaism, we remember our loved ones 5 times a year, sorry. On the anniversary of their death, which is the Yortzeit, on Yom Kippur for Yizkor, and then the 3 Yizkors of Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. There's a Yizkor. Yizkor means remember. So I say in Judaism, we don't move on when someone dies, we move with. We bring them with us. We remember them. We light candles for them. We say Kaddish for them all our lives afterwards. And that is how they live. And we perform good deeds to honor their memories. So that's Jewish rituals of birth, wedding, and death in an hour in a nutshell. Any questions before we leave? Thank you so much. And of course, if you have anything you need, you can always email me or anything if you want to know more. And I have handouts. If you want handouts on any of this stuff for your records, I'm happy to send them to you. I've got thick handouts for each ritual that if you'd like to have them. So goodbye, everyone. It was a pleasure. And
Goodbye and
Thank
thank
you.
you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
All right,
It was
thank you,
so
Rabbi.
good.
You're welcome. I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Bye.
See everyone soon.
Thank
Tomorrow,
you,
whenever.
Rabbi.